Hello and welcome. In this video we are going to look at taking all of these layers for a face, and we're specifically concentrating on just the eye. We'll do the rest of the head, but the primary focus on this tutorial is how to start putting together the eye. So if we look at a couple of things that we have going on with this, if I isolate it, well, no, that's just the handle for the eyelid. But if we look here, we have eyelids where we have an entire block of color that will allow us to mask out so that with those eyelids, we'll be able to move them on the eye, we'll be able to shape it. We'll start a brief introduction of using deformers with it. So stay tuned, we have a bunch of things going on in this video. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to start putting together all of our nodes for the face. And you may be noticing an important thing here is that we just have one eye, we don't have two eyes, and what we're going to do is we're going to clone the eyes. So once we make one eye, we'll clone it, and then we'll use a static transformation to allow it to permanently reflect the flipped information that it needs, so that we only have to make one eye, and then one can be our left eye, one can be our right eye. So with that, we'll jump over into our node view, which we can see is in its default situation after having constructed all of the nodes, or the drawings, and we will start by opening it up. So we fan it out here. Now the rough drawing, I can just move that down here. Don't really need to worry about that too much. We'll just pull the main comp down. And now what we need to do is to start organizing things. To better organize this, because we do have so many parts, and to be able to clone it effectively, what's going to be nice on this is we will use a group, because that will simplify our overall node structure. And there are pros and cons to using groups and not using groups. Some rig designs like to keep everything essentially flat so we don't tuck things away in groups. Others use groups inside of groups inside of groups. And it's some based on performance, some personal preference, some organizational kind of mental constructs of how you want to do it. It's not necessarily right or wrong, but what we do need to do is start moving some parts around and organize it. But the first thing that I want to do is I am going to recognize that I have all of these nodes here from the handles. So these are handles, artwork that's been drawn, the little pink handles that you saw. So we'll be able to click on those to move the lids up and down instead of trying to grab the lid itself. So that's a useful thing we'll do. We'll also add another handle drawing layer as this progresses, to be able to just slide and select the whole face instead of having to click on it and then Shift B up and down through our node tree. We can just grab the handle and move it. So right now we have the handles, the lids, the highlight, the pupilled iris, and the white of the eye. All of those are selected. What I want to do next is go right click, and I am going to choose group with composite. So that's going to create a group. Oh, forgot. Do this I think almost every time. Everything here is going to want to have a peg on it. So we want the pegs, because if you notice when I grouped that, I had all of these, the little green dots across the top of that group. And then that just becomes problematic trying to organize everything. So now with all of these selected, a simple Command or Control Shift P, now we get a peg on all of our items. And now I will re-highlight. Oh, we want the eyebrow to go with it as well. So we have the eyebrows, the handles, because I'm going to be tucking the eyebrow in with the eye so that we're going to be cloning that as well. We could have the eyebrows out of it and the eye could just be the eye. It's kind of, that would be I suppose personal preference on how you want to go about doing that. In this example, I am going to tuck them in together. So with all of those nodes selected, find somewhere clean to right click, and we're choosing group with composite. So now, and forgot once again. So we have all of those nodes. Let's just select these, organize it horizontally so it's going to be easier to connect all of those to a single node. So now Command P, this is going to be our I peg. This will be the I master. Might as well just type that in right now, get that named. So there is the I master peg. Now select all of these nodes. So third time's the charm. And now we can see that's much cleaner for our organization with this. So now we are pretty much all set. Let's just take these, we'll organize those horizontally as well. And we can look at the different features here. We have the eye. I want the hair to be sitting on top of the eye, so I will move that over with it. So now technically nothing, oh, we moved that over, but we will also need to move our cable over. So nose, mouth, ear, head, neck. So nothing has really changed in the rest of our scene here, but we've put the eye into a group, and now this is where we're going to want to start grouping this together. So with that group, I can just click plus here. Just one thing to be aware of, when you do make groups, it sometimes will change the ordering of things so that you will look at the end result and you'll be like, those cables just flip-flopped, and it can be really frustrating when that happens because that's unexpected. So with our eye group set up, what we want to do is to start to set it so that I can use the white of the eye as a cutter for the upper and lower lids. So we have the upper and lower lids, and we want to cut those, as well as, I guess, the highlight in the eye, the pupil, the iris. I want to be able to move the eyes. So let's just exit out of full screen here, just to get a better understanding of what we are attempting to do with this. Is one, if we have the lid here and want to move it, we can see how I can move it. So this is why I want to be able to use that handle, because eventually when the lids are being cut by the face, and they will be effectively not clickable, there won't be anything to click on because it won't be in the eye. So when that's occurring, we're going to need to have a way to access it, and that's what those handles will be. But first, what we want to do is to set up a cutter so that we are cutting the artwork of the eye. So to accomplish that, we will just add in a cutter node. So now I have added in a cutter node, and with that I'm going to need a composite. Let's just move this over here a little bit so we can see. I'm going to leave this up while we're working, just so that we can better see how this is starting to come together. So I want the iris, the pupil, the highlight, upper and lower lid to be cut by the color of the white of the eye, not all of the white of the eye, just its color. So to accomplish that, let's just go. So we grab a color art node, and we want the white of the eye to go into that color art, and that color art is going to be our cutter. And if we don't want to have to add a cutter to each layer, what we can do, let me just zoom out a little bit here so we fit. So we have our lower lids to the white of the eye. We'll worry about the handles in a little bit. We just need another comp, so just start typing in comp. And now I have this comp here. We'll grab our cable cutter and we'll just cut all of those because we don't need those connected anymore. And now I want to connect all of these to this composite. So the lids, the highlight, the pupil, and the iris. So if I just highlight all of these, hold down Alt or Option, and click on that composite, we'll see it joins them there. Put those into the cutter, and then that cutter is going to allow us to go down here. And if we notice, they're blocked by the white of the eye because they're on top of the white of the eye, but the white of the eye is showing. So what we need to do is invert our cutter. And there's two ways we can do it. One is we can click on the yellow square and click inverted. So we can see how now it's been inverted. If we click off, we'll see there it is, it's closed. The other way that we can toggle it is just double click on the little mask icon that inverts the cutter. So now if I grab the lid and move it, we'll see how it moves. But there's a problem happening here. And what it is when we're just using the plain cutter with the color art, technically the color art is now drawing through the middle. Because if we turn off this composite, we'll see that is the thickness of our stroke. But here, where the cutter is cutting it, it cuts it halfway through. So the color sits in the middle of our stroke. So when we have our strokes drawn with the pencil tool, and then we have our color fills, the stroke is technically a path exactly in the middle. So that's why it's cutting there. So what we need is we need the line art, a copy of the line art of the eye to sit on top. So the way we can accomplish that is similar to how when we are doing auto patching on different body parts. I'll just type in line art. And now let's go to the white of the eye. We'll grab the line art and we'll put a copy of its line art on top. And there it is. Now, technically, as we're doing this, what would be better is not to be putting a copy of it here and the color art. So what I can do is just cut that cable right there and then put a copy of the color art. So if the color art, we have all the other layers, then the line art sitting on top. And now we can see we have a perfect clean line happening here for us. So that's good. That has set things up a little bit easier, so we can now see what is happening. So I can go grab the lower lid, can move that down. If I grab the pupil and iris, now normally the pupil and iris, they should have their own pegs so we can make the pupil dilate more, bigger or smaller. But I want to have the ability to click once and move them both, kind of like when we do with a lower limb, so it moves the lower arm plus hand or lower leg plus foot. So with that, what I'm going to do is just add in another peg here, and we'll just do Command P, that gives me a peg. Put that there, and now drag this one back up to the master. So that is now the master peg for the pupil and iris. So now if I just click on that, I can now move the pupil and iris. And it makes sense that the highlight's not moving because the highlight is based on where a light source is. So if the highlight doesn't move with it, I think that, works out fine. So now you can see how we're able to move or animate the eye within that. We still have to set all of our positions for these pegs, so we haven't set any of those yet. But it's important first to get our hierarchies working with this. So we have our cutter going on, we have this intermediate composite going into the cutter. So we're joining all those layers together, so we only have to use one cutter, so that's a more efficient way. Well, didn't mean to hit play. Here we go. More efficient way of putting those together. Now we have the eyebrow. We'll have to figure that out, as well as then the upper and lower lids, and how do we access those handles with it. So Well, notice this handle is sitting behind the hair here. This is over here. So what I want to do is I want to not put those into the eye composite. I want them to exit out of it next to it. And notice it says multi-port out. So this composites are always a single port out, so only one piece comes out, but we want multiple. But I don't want to just drag both of them down. So what I will do is I will just create another composite, and now I will stick that composite on that lid there, or I mean that handle for the lid there, and I can now drag this over here. So this is the composite for my two handles. Now you will notice they disappeared because that output isn't being addressed. If I go over here, we'll see, turn that back off. So we can see that there is an additional output now from this group. So now we need to handle that output. So if I drag this over to here, we'll see that the handles reappeared and I put them on top. But we're going to do something slightly different with this. So what I'm going to do now, this really is a composite for my whole scene, and what I probably want is a composite just for the head itself. So we can group it all together and work with that. So I'm just going to go here, bring out an additional composite, and instead of connecting all of those pieces to it, what we're going to do is disconnect those. We'll connect right. So this is my scene composite. Just give it a name. So this is if I have, different characters, background, all of that. We'll put that all into the scene composite. Now technically this is only really the head and neck composite, and we would have all the different parts of our character most likely grouped together, and then it would just be one cable going into the scene composite. So we kind of build it in stages here. So now I want a way to take these and connect those and work with it. But if I go and look at the render view of my scene, well, I still see those, and I don't want those handles to show up in my scene. So what we can do, first I'm going to make a composite, because as we build a whole character, we're going to end up having a lot of these different handles they can speed up. So instead of having to say click on something and then hit B 1, 2, 3 times, we can make handles that represent a whole arm or a whole leg, or if we have details on a character such as a wrinkle on the knee or something and want to easily be able to select it, we just put a handle there. So this will be my handle composite. And now I will just attach that to my scene, and I will dump this into it. So that's good, but they still show. So the additional thing we want to do is go find a visibility node. Now when I look at a visibility node, it has two options: soft render and display an OpenGL view. Well, right here, this gear icon indicates I'm in my OpenGL view, and this icon is my render view. So OpenGL render, that's my soft render view. So if I deselect soft render view, that means it's not going to show up when it renders. So now if we just insert this here, okay, those show up there, that's great. But if we go over into our render view, we can see that those handles disappear. So it's really common to set up certain things. So we have additional nodes, helper nodes, other things, and we set up a visibility node so that they're in our animation view, but we turn them off in our render view. And sometimes when we're working with effects that are slowing everything down, we turn them off in our OpenGL view and turn them on in our render view, just because once we have it all dialed in, we don't want it to slow down our animation, but we don't want to have, be clicking or activating and deactivating nodes and remembering which ones we turn on and off, it's much easier to just use the visibility node to control that. So this is our first step here of organizing it. Now, if I go back into this view and we go and look at the eye, first thing that I want to do with my group is I am just going to remove that keyframe information so it's all turned back off. And we want to put some deformers on. Now, deformers, there's a couple of different kinds of deformers, so that if I click on my lower eyelid, you can see there's the artwork for the lower eyelid. And what I'm going to do is disconnect the cutter so now we can see the lower eyelid in its entirety. So there is the lower eyelid. I can see it framed by that purple. So the hammer wrench icon up here is where we can go to our rigging tool. This is where we create deformers. And if I click on that, it pulls it up. Now it remembers the last time I used a deformer, I created an envelope deformer. The two most common ones we make are we're going to do a curve deformer or an envelope deformer. So we'll look at doing the envelope deformer for the eyes, and then we'll do a curve deformer for the eyebrow to see how we can work with that to do it. So what we do when we're setting it up, we have the artwork layer selected, we have the rigging tool selected, and what I can do to insert this, and the way that it works is if I just click, you'll notice it creates points with handles. So we have a little handle there, Bezier, so it assumes that we're trying to create these curves. So I'm just going to undo those here. Let's start that again. So what we do is we want the handles to be approximately 1/3 the length of the line that they're trying to affect. So between 2 points, each handle on each end should be about 1/3 of the line. So I click and drag backwards. And it seems a little counterintuitive, but that's how it works. So now I click and drag up about 1/3 the length right there. And we will go back and adjust these handles as we put them in. So about 1/3, about 1/3. And now when I get to my end here, zooming in so we can see if I hold down Alt or Option, we'll see if I'm just clicking, it's going to insert points. We have that little C. But now when I get over the end point and hold, it changes from being a plus to the circle, and that indicates it's going to close that point. Now I can see I have these separate handles. And ideally what you do when you're setting deformers is you want to try and get them so that they are as close to the edge or the surface that they are trying to affect. And I'm just going to click over here and disable that one so I know that while I'm working on this one it is indeed, and again I'm using the rigging tool, so it is indeed the correct line I'm looking at. So now I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I don't need to be quite that close, and we'll see if I stretch this. Well, that's not going to really help, but if I hold down Alt or Option, I can now turn this into a corner point. And once I've broken the first one, I don't have to keep holding it down. We just need to move over a little bit. So again, Alt or Option, that puts it in. Now if I realize I don't want it, I want those to be continued, I hold down Alt or Option and click on that point. All right, actually if I pull this down, once it hits to that 90 degree, it rejoins that corner. Now I'm not too worried about this because most of this stuff here is hidden. So it doesn't really matter if I'm super precise on that. What does matter is across this line up here. So I'm going to just pull that up, go up to my point here, hold down Alt or Option, click and pull that down, pull this up a little bit more, pull this down, because now what I'll be able to do when I'm using my transform tool to animate, I can now click on this and adjust the shape of this. And then when we have the cutter reconnected, so things are properly cutting, we're going to be able to see and create. So if I need or want to create curvature, and it's fully animatable with that. So this is how we create that. Now you'll find if at times if you create deformers and you don't want to see them anymore, in our tool palette we have the little white hash lines where it says hide all controls. I click on that, it goes away. So now with this node selected, if I want to see what's there, in our rigging tools up here, we have an option to show deformer. I click on that, it puts the lines, it makes those lines visible. Now we'll hide that one. I'm going to disable that lid. I'll re-enable this one, so D and A, enable, disable. Now also notice as we do this, let's just pull this back up, we don't need to see that much. It created this additional node. And if I go into that node, what I will see is I now have, here's what my deformer looks like. So let's go into the upper node here. I'm going to look at that node. And once again, grab the rigging tool, and I am going to just simply, I can click and pull back so we can see how that now creates that curved line. To adjust it, you can click and pull backwards, and then when I get to the end, hold down Alt. We see how it's now a circle, not a crosshair. Click, and now I have my handles. And once again, with the rigging tool active, I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, so I can now separate those corners out. And then that gives me my second eyelid deformer. And we can see there it is inside our eye. Now if we go into the eyebrow here, let's hide controls now with the eyebrow selected. Rigging tool. So if we do a curve deformer and start at the beginning of the eye, click. So you can see as we work with it, I can click. The color is a little problematic. Click again. Now if we go to animate this, grab my animation tool, you can see how we're able to work with it. We can even grab the whole handle and rotate it. So if you want to animate or change the eyebrow on something like this, which is predominantly linear, just using the curve is going to be useful. You can create the same effect using the envelope deformer. Just click and drag and be done, and then that's all you need on it. So with that, I'm going to just click on this keyframe right here, clear that keyframe so it goes back to its original shape. So once again, when we work with the rigging tool, we have that. Now if you decide after you've rigged something, you tried working with it, it's not working quite right, and you want to get back into it, well, once you see the deformer for that object, and again, if there are no deformers, I click on a node, show deformer, there it is. Now if I go back to the rigging tool, notice it's red, click on it, yellow, click on it, it's now showing me that it is ready for me to be modifying that because it's now red. So anytime we see red, it's telling us that we're in modification mode. When we see yellow, it tells us that we're in animation mode. It's not unlike when we switch from animate, which is yellow, animate off, so we can modify things without creating keyframes, and that is red. So even when we select something with a peg, see how now it gets a red overlay. So if I select the peg for the highlight on the eye, everything is turning reddish. It's a red overlay. But if we're now on animate, it's the yellow overlay. So use that kind of as a visual clue. Now, depending on what your artwork color is, it sometimes is not very easy to see that. So now we've added in deformation for the eyebrow with the lids. So we have set all of our different parts here, got those configured. What I do want to do now is, before I leave this eye group, is just set our peg information for it. Now the good part about this is that's the center of my screen, so I just click on the little overlay to see that. So if I start going through here to figure out where things are, oh yeah, and let's just hide all our controls, we don't need to see that. Grab our rotate tool, we can see it starts out there in the middle. So the white of the eye, what we're going to do with that one is just put it in the middle, approximate middle there, and the iris, pupil, and eye there. Probably could have even selected that. Now with the highlight, I can't really see that yet, so we'll go to the lower lid so I can actually see where that highlight is, and now we'll position that just on the highlight. So lower lid, well, we'll do upper lid first since I can see that. You can't see it. So for this, I am going to put it, I mean, because we have a deformer on it now and we'll be doing a lot of, kind of movement with it, we probably aren't going to be rotating it like this. We'll instead animate that with the deformer. Otherwise, normally putting it at the corner of the eye is a common place to put it. So I am going to just put both at the kind of corner of the eye there. Now, one thing as I do this, what I want is I want this handle, which I'm going to put this, we'll put all these also at the corner of the eye. So I could have just selected all of them at once and just did one move. But what I want is when I grab the lower lid handle, I want to move the lower lid. When I grab the upper lid handle, I want to move the upper lid. So what's going to happen as we do this is if I have my animate tool and now click on this, we can see how that allows me to select it, which right now isn't a big deal. But now if I click on this and move it up so the eye is totally open, how do I gain access to that again? Well, one, it's not being cut yet because I turned that off. So let's just go put the color artist cutting it once more. See, now there is no way to click on it and grab it, but by having that handle, we are able to do so. Now we just need to make sure we don't pull it too far, but we can very quickly and easily animate that lid. Now if I click here on this handle, oh, it's like, where is it? Forgot to turn it back on. There we go. So now if I click on the handle, I can move it. So now both eyes I can move, and if I say show deformer, I can see the deformer for it. So if I want to put a little curve in, I can do that. If I click on the upper lid here, now if I choose show deformer, notice the other one went away. If I want to see more than one deformer, what I do is go to the multiple show controls or show selected deformer. So now I can see both of them. So now zoom in so I can actually find the handle. I want to grab that. Zoom in a little bit more. That is a pesky one to gain access to. There we go. So now I can curve that, zoom back out, grab that, so you can see how we're able to set this information just using the transform tool, and we've been able to create a much more interesting eye shape and animate it quite readily. So again, these handles are a fantastic way of being able to grab things. We can work with that. All right, so now what I'm going to do is just remove that keyframe. I always like to start with it clean before we do anything else. So our pivot points have all been set. Oh, our eye master, we probably want to set that pivot point as well. For this one, we can decide whether we want on the eye master, grab the rotate tool. Do I want to set it so that the eye is moving from there? It's not a bad idea. Sometimes we can do some fun things by putting it down at the bottom, because then I can quickly stretch the eye up and down. And this is where we might want to remove the eyebrow so it's not connected to it. I'm also thinking that I might want the eyebrow on top of the hair so I can move it up. That's going to be something that we'll have to figure out. For now, I'm going to leave the eyebrow with the eye, but we may, as you kind of work with a rig, this is where you discover how you sometimes have to make some changes or customizations as you go. It also seems that I may have bumped the hair because the hair is not where it should be, and if I look here, I do have some keyframes, so I think, well, talking or wiggling things around, yeah, I moved the head and hair. So no big deal. We just clear those keyframes. Sometimes it's not a bad idea while you're working to go and choose animate off, so if you move things you don't get keyframes, but I'm going to leave that on because then I will know if I've accidentally adjusted things that I did not mean to adjust. With the eye in place, what we're going to do, let's see, that is, I'll just shrink this up a little bit more so I can fit all of these on screen. So what I want to set up with all of this is we're going to need to clone the eye, and we'll look at that. We're going to set our other pivot points and connect those pieces in as well. So I think I'm going to do that next. So I'll grab the rotate tool, click on the hair, peg here, decide I'm just going to put that right at the base of the hair. Now this particular hair would probably be better as a hair group, and I would have 3 or 4 separate layers so that I could move them a little bit more independently. It's also something where I could add a deformer to it and I could follow around these curves and edges on it. And if I did have separate ones, I could just use a simple curve deformer for each shape and animate those. That would be another way of working with it. Now with the nose, I'm just going to put it more at the base of the nose there, and the mouth, put in the mouth. Now currently the mouth is just a single drawing. There is no, we don't have multiple drawings. We haven't separated it into lips and teeth and things like that. But really doing that is very much like working with the, it's like working with the eye, where we have a simple shape that we're working with, because now what I want to do as I set these different parts up is I want to configure things so that if I move the face, so we're going to create a peg that controls the eye, nose, and mouth and moves those. and we do need another eye, so we'll be adding that shortly. So with that, I want another peg, so Command or Control P, and I'll just name this face peg, putting that in, and we can connect the nose to it, the mouth to it, and the eye to it. So when we set those, and that center kind of is an adequate place for that to exist. Now if I use my transform tool on animate, what I want is, okay, well that's not quite working because I want the face to start cutting these shapes. So if we think about what we've already learned and done, what we need to do is we need to now have another comp. So this is going to be my face cut comp. And with that, that's going to hold, no, not the hair, it's going to hold the eye. It's going to hold the nose. Actually, we'll leave that one there. Don't need that. And now the mouth goes into it as well. So now this face comp, if I move it, we'll see, okay, I can just grab one. This is where we probably want to even just draw or add another handle so we have something to work with on this, because it just makes it much easier. I can grab that handle to move the face instead of trying to click on a part, which when we start trying to create a full rotating rig and things like that, that becomes more important. Now that I have this here, let's just move that. Going to need a little bit more space here. We'll pull that down. I like to have straight lines at times. So we need a cutter, and we need some line art. So the face comp is going to be cut. And I just remembered, well, we'll look at what this is doing. We're probably going to want another comp. Having done this a couple times, I do know that some of these things matter. Now, I want the head to cut it, but I don't want... Oh, well, we need the liner. We want the head to be the cutter. Notice it went away, but remember we need to invert the cutter, so we're doing an invert cut. So that's there. So now, with that face comp, if I grab this peg, hit B to go up. See, again, this is where having an additional handle would be nice. Now if I move this over, we can see it doesn't go out. Okay, we got some weirdness happening with... So we can see that is where the edge of the head is. So we are going to have to take care of some things with the ear. We also need the line art to sit on top when we're doing that. So now we need the line art from the head, and we will put the line art on top. Now what I want to do with this is to simplify it. I mean, I can drag the line art all the way down and sit it here, but probably going to do something a little bit different on it. So hit B, now let's see, okay. Now I can see the line art is there. I also am noticing I want the ears to be behind the head, because right now we can see we have the line of the head, but then the ear is on top, and well, that's clear because we have ear, head. So I could reverse the order of that, or I can just, with the head selected, we'll grab that, click on it so I can see which node, or I mean which cable. Drag it over, so now it's sitting on top, so the ears are behind. And if we grab this, now we can see now it's behaving much better. Still torn on whether I want the eyebrows on top or not, but for now we'll just leave it. So we can see that is now working. So we just had to reorder things a little bit to set it up. Now, as we start sliding things around, we may not want, because as we move towards a profile kind of view, we may not want the nose to be cut, especially if we have additional nose drawings to work with. So kind of a front and a profile nose. But if I want this nose to extend out, so as I start rotating, I don't really want the nose to be cut, so I want the nose to be on top. So if we go to where the nose is here, probably don't need the nose to be cut. So we can, if the nose is on top, we can see how now we're going to be able to stick the nose outside. Now, as you create additional views, you sometimes do have to create, do some nudging of layers. That's normal. That's part of establishing those different rotational views. So we would push the hair forward or back as we work with that. But it's definitely all moving in the right direction. So I do want, I think, a handle for the face so I don't have to keep clicking and hitting B. So to create a new node, okay, and we will add the second eye in just a moment, but we will add a handle for the face. So to do that, it's Command or Control R, and this will be my handle face. So now we have the handle for the face, and I am going to drag that down into my handle composite. So it's there. And now we'll just move the hair over a little bit. We'll just put this right here. And the handle for the face is going to end up sharing the same position. The good part is we just use the middle of that. So I can just Command P. So the handle for the face is going to control the face. So that's cool, except we don't have any artwork yet. So I'm just going to go click on my pencil and let's modify this. I know I was using 8, 10, and about 15. Or not 10, 100% 15, so it's a consistent size. And with my pencil, just want to go into my color. Now I've made a color that is transparent, so we can see colors that are transparent. They give us the two-tone on it. So we can just simply switch to transparent. So I set my alpha at 130. I chose a color that's garish and not in it. It's typical to use like a kind of a bright pink or a bright turquoise as your colors, or cyan if you prefer that kind of naming. And now what I'm going to do with my pencil tool is just simply on the line art, kind of in this region because it's by where the face is, I'm just going to draw myself a little circle below eye, and I'm just going to turn off where it's now trying to connect lines, zoom in a little bit. Yeah, I don't like what it drew there, so I'll delete that. Go back to the pencil. Get a little eye, nose, mouth. So that's on my line art. Now I can select this line here, say create color art, grab my paint bucket, go to the color art and fill. And my line isn't closed. We can see that very clearly, so if we just zoom out, that should close it, or fine. Now we've created enough closure so we can fill it. All right, so now I have a handle. And some people make really pretty little handle icons that they use for all of their rigs and just store those in a template. They can drag it into a project and then start connecting those up as nodes. So as you start creating more and more content, that is a pretty common thing, is to have kind of helper templates that work for you as you're going. So, all right, so now we have the handle for the face, we have one eye, and I need a second eye. This is where the fun comes in. So I can just select this. Now we don't want to copy paste it. If we copy paste it, what it's going to do is create, if I look under the node menu, that would create a clone of both drawing and timing. So any change I make to one is going to affect the other. So that will be problematic. What we want to do is we want to clone the selected drawings only, because if we do this, then it makes an exact copy, and if I modify one, it updates the other. If we choose duplicate, it creates a completely independent, unattached, brand new duplicate of what's there, which is useful in some situations. But if we clone things, this is common for hands, feet, eyes, groups like this, because once I make one, it will update the other one as well. So if I say clone a hand, if I make additional drawings of the hand, then when I have the right and left hand, they both will show that update. So I'm going to just clone the drawings. And here we go. We can see there is that rig. It looks virtually identical. And what we want to do is I am going to, with this selected, just add a peg to it, because we are going to need to do a little bit of a transformation on this. And I will add this to my face comp. So it's there. We're going to add its handle. Remember, that's the handle output right here. So if we look at this, it now tells me that it's output. We have port 0 here. Put that there. And you may notice that the pink got a little bit deeper because that is transparent pink, and transparent over transparent gets a little bit stronger. Again, switch into our render view and we can see that we don't see those handles, so that's nice. Go back to our original view. And now with this eye selected, what I want to do with this eye is we are going to flip it. Now, if I just make this window a little bit bigger, we'll see we have options for doing so that we can flip it when we have our transform tool selected or our translate tool, but we have this option to flip. So if I flip it, we'll see it now put the eye over there, and because my face was drawn in the middle, this is handy to have a center line when you're creating artwork. It was drawn in the middle, it's all in alignment. So that puts me into a really good shape. But what we want to do is we want to make this flip permanent. We want it to be fixed as part of it. And the way that we do that is we use a special node called static transformation. And what we do with the static transformation is we go and we put this node in right there, and you look at me like, okay, nothing changed. That's cool. Now, what I do is I open up static transformation, and what we select is we say bake incoming parents transformation. So we take and make this transformation effectively permanent. That's what doing this method gives us. And it's not unlike if you're working in a 3D program like Blender, where if you scale an object and then you try and start doing some different modifiers and other things, or you go into edit mode on it, so go from object to edit mode, and then you get some weird results, and you're like, this isn't behaving how I want. Sometimes you have to then apply that transformation. So after you scale, rotate, or whatever else you do, you right click on it and you apply that transformation, so it effectively re-zeroes everything out. So then when you do your modifiers and different edits, they behave properly. And that's what this does. So I'll choose bake, and we'll notice it went back to the left side, so it effectively disappeared. And you may be going, okay, well then that's dumb. What's going on with that? And then I'll just click on the node that did the flip, delete it, and there we go. So we have to leave the static item here, but we're in good shape. And now I can just simply drag and connect that to the face. And if I grab the face handle, which I don't need to do it up there, I can grab it down here. Well, see, now I can move the whole face and it's behaving. I can go and grab, click off it, grab this eye here, can grab this one here, pull it down, and make him look a little bit stoned. So we're in pretty good shape here. Let's get rid of all of these keyframes. I'm just going to set it back to normal because as we're configuring this, I like to try and get things as clean as possible first. So now the handles, it's common to leave all the handles so they come out. Ideally, we have kind of one handle composite for all the different body parts, one visibility node, so it's easy to find. So when we start making groups and we'll start grouping different things together, that, so when I make my head group that I'll be doing here in a moment, those will come out. When we do our whole character, the whole character composite is going to, which will then get grouped, will contain this visibility as part of it. So we don't want it to be kind of floating out of that because then it gets hard when we make templates and move projects between files, or templates between files. All right, so let's get a little bit more room here so I can see everything that I have. So right now we have all of this scene composite, everything else going on. So we're going to turn this, we have our face, we have our hair, these different other things. So what I want to do is to create a master peg for the face, or for the head really. Head master. And now with that master peg constructed for the head, so with that, the handles are going to be part of that, the hair is going to be part of that, each ear will be part of it, and the same way we can select a bunch of things on top, click on one below, and hold down Alt or Option. With that selected up there, I can now hold down Alt or Option, which I find a little bit easier than trying to drag things. So the neck isn't really part of the head, so I'm going to leave that separate. So the head master, I do like to have that pivot point set around the chin, so I like my head to be able to kind of animate around the chin there. So now this is really a character composite. I'm going to put the neck down here on the scene, and what we're going to do is turn the head. So we could put all of this into a single backdrop if we were using all backdrops and keeping it relatively flat. But if I wanted to group the head just into a group, and we're going to have an arm group and a leg group, and we'll clone those the same way we did with the eyes. We'll have a torso group, so we can have a bunch of groups, or we can set all of this onto a backdrop. It does depend on whether you want the flatter hierarchy or the more complex hierarchy, or just how involved it gets. So if this is going to be my whole character that we want to eventually group together, I'm going to just add in one more composite. And notice, we get our favorites, things we've done recently there. So I'm going to just rename this one as character composite. Character comp. That's long enough. So my character comp, we are going to add the handles to it. We are going to add the head to it, and I'm going to add the neck to it. And now we'll just add that to our scene. We need to make a little bit more space down here. So I will just pull that down. Let me pull this down. Because when we have the character as a composite like this, this makes it easy. And it's, I think, a good idea to add your own composite. So when you do group things, and if you group it with composite, it will sometimes move some of your cable orders around, and then you'll have to go back and fix that. So then that's problematic. So if this is my whole character here, So these are handles. I don't want those to be part of it. This is now simply my head composite because that's my character, so we will rename this one. It's a good practice to name your different elements because it helps with organization. So if I'm building a flat character where I have backdrops for each thing and it's separated, then I would select all of these nodes here and I would go insert backdrop, and now I have a backdrop for this. I can move it around. We'll zoom out a little bit more. We can see the handles are separate. Now it's common. Make a little backdrop there, and I'm going to change the color for that. I'll just make it red. Oh. And then we'll name it. This will be handles. Close that out. We'll rename this one. Change the color, and this will be head. So if I'm setting up my scene, so we'll have a head composite, I'll have my handles, then I'll have my torso. So the neck here will be part of my different torso. I could have an upper torso and a hips backdrop depending on how complex I'm doing it. So if my upper torso has shoulders and sleeves and all kinds of crazy things there, and then we have hips with lots of layers. If it's simple, I can just put all the kind of the main trunk nodes in a single backdrop. Otherwise I could break it into multiple, and then we will have our different limbs as part of it. So again, one style is we use lots of backdrops and keep it flat, and we just end up with this huge kind of view to find things. But it does make it easy when I'm trying to then cut between different groups, especially for torso and limbs. And some rig styles prefer to just keep nesting everything into a group. So there's a happy medium somewhere that as you build out different rigs you will find. So now that we have our character comp there, and would probably, this would be sitting much lower because we would have more and more backdrops with it. So with my character comp there, so right now that is the head master, that is the neck master, and then what we're going to need is another peg, and this is going to be my character master peg. Ideally I would replace character with a name on it, and now I can drag that down to there, drag this over to the neck so that they're all connected. And normally the character peg sits between the feet. So when the character is standing, so that would be sitting between the feet. So with all of these different layers selected, if I highlight all of that, and then I right click and just choose group here, we'll see we just have a single group. Everything is in it. There it is, and this is going to be my character group. And that gives me a character to be part of my scene. Now, of course, we need to flesh out the rest of it, put the whole character in, but this is the starting process for building out that whole character rig. And now to fit this character into my scene, we will usually have a scene peg that we attach to it. So with that peg, I can now scale that character. Whoa. Let's try again. That's kind of odd. There we go. So now I can scale that character down to fit it into my scene. So if we have different character templates that we've brought in from different sources. We can now fit them into our scene so they are properly scaled and placed within the scene. So this is our character group's scene peg. So with that, it's not a bad idea to, again, name things so you know what they are referring to. And with this, we can now extend the exposure out for the character. I can click on things, I can move it around, I can click on the eyebrow or eyelid, move that around. I can click on this, choose show my deformer. Probably need to zoom in a little bit more to see it. Oh. And if I click off it, then there we go. So when we have the whole thing, the node selected, it gets a little bit tricky to grab onto it. But now you'll see how we can add a little bit of expression, hide the node. And if we select everything and say show multiple transformers, you'll see that we have these complex rigs. When you click on them, most modern cutout rigs have deformers, especially then envelope deformers on everything. And in the process of doing that, it lights up like a Christmas tree. Now, if I go, let's just get rid of the keyframing that I did there. So we're back to normal. That being said, if I go into the head and have that head selected, and I'm going to hit O down here to isolate it to that. And if I solo the layer, clicking the little dot next to the eyeball, we'll hide all the existing deformers. So if I wanted on the head to add a deformer, and let's just verify which one, I want to go back to envelope deformer. So we're going to just add a deformer to the head as part of it, and you can kind of decide where you want to start. Since I have the main point for, or the pivot point down at the bottom on the head, I'll put it there, or I won't put it here, but I'll click and drag in the direction, and then we drag back. So I'm looking for where there is kind of a change in curve, and that's what I'm aiming for. Now I can see right there, I'm going to have to go back in. And one thing is that the more points you have, so if I just go and add lots of these points like this, it's going to be really hard to animate with this, because if I add this many points to my deformer, hold down Alt, get the circle to close it. But if I have that many points in my deformer, now it's like, okay, I grab this one, or if I grab this one. So if you have something that really requires precision as part of the modifying, then yeah, add a ton of points. But if you don't, try and limit yourself. So on something that's kind of like circular here, so we have 1, 2, then we'll do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If we do about 8 points, that's going to, I've got to go back to the rigging tool. Click on this so it knows that's where we left off. So if we have about 8 points, that's going to give me ultimately the best control as I work with it. Any more than that and it just becomes unmanageable. So now my points are connected, and what I need to do is to zoom in a little bit so I can work with them. Pull that down a little bit there, hold down Alt so I can break that corner there, pull this out. So this one with that little pucker, I might want an additional point, but I think this is going to be close enough for what I need to be able to animate with this. So now with that envelope set up, and we can see there is the deformer that's been added to the head. Once again, we will just close on our character group. We can see closing on the master peg. So if I want to start animating, because we have the scene peg, we're in the group, so I really am animating here. So I could close all the way to the scene peg, but it's probably going to be better to animate there. Let's click on the head, go back over here, and stop soloing this layer. There we go. Go back to our transform tool so we can animate. And now I will close on the character peg. Click here. And simply F6, have a keyframe. If I go here, it disappears because we don't have any exposure beyond frame 1. So now I'll put in some exposure. So now if I needed to adjust the shape of the head, so as I move over here, I want to pull, don't want to select everything. Escape. Now this is where now I can insert that new keyframe. Escape, click on this, and I'm going to simply adjust the shape a little bit. So you may be realizing that probably going to be doing a little rotating of the head. Now I'm going to click on the face, so I slide that over here a little bit. I'm going to hit escape, click on this ear, put the ear behind the head a little, click on this ear, pull this ear over. I want this ear to be in front of the hair, so we're going to have to nudge it forward. So Option B, or Option down arrow, or Alt down arrow, while we're in this view. And with that, I'm going to open some eyes. And so I've selected the pupil and iris. For both eyes, just to make it easy, pull those over. And then I'm going to pull those over, and what we'll see is we now have started a basic head turn. Probably need to slide the hair over a little bit. The hair is going to be begging for a deformer when we do this. Don't want to shrink it quite that much. Move that over just a hair. This is where having a deformer on the hair would be useful, but if we look at what we have here, we can see how our character is starting to do a little bit of a head turn. We've been able to morph the shape of it, and this is how these parts start to come together. This is how they become useful to us when we are working on our project. So now you have a head. Good luck and have fun animating.